Truth about Russia and Ukraine, Part 1. Frontline realities and Putin's failing strategy. This is what we will talk about today. This video is a part of series. This is part 1. In this part we will talk about what is happening on the battlefield. We will talk about military on both sides, problems on the front and current dynamics. This would be the part 1. And part 2, can Putin defeat Ukraine on the battlefield? And I will tell you what is actually happening right now on the battlefield in Ukraine and in Kursk region of Russia. As a prequel to this series, I recommend to watch this my video, The Experts on the War in Ukraine. General Ben Hodges, General Petraeus, and Chuck Pfarrer, military analyst. So you could have the whole picture, what is happening, what will happen, and why it will happen. Hello there. I'm Elena, welcome back to my channel Enough of Propaganda. Please like, subscribe, share my videos, and let's make truth available for everyone. I'm grateful to all my subscribers for all your support. I'm grateful for people who watched my videos and spreading the word of truth to everyone. This is important. The war in Ukraine is the bloodiest war since 1945. We need to help Ukraine. The sooner the better. And it would be better not only just for Ukrainians, it will be better for all of us, and even for Russian people. It wouldn't be better for Putin, but for Russian people, it would be blessing because, as you will find out today, over 1,200, sometimes 1,400 of Russians killed, wounded, and missing in action every single day in the last months. In the last week, Russia lost over 10,040 people. About 10,040 people, and just in 1 week, the horrendous losses of Russia. Let's dive in what is happening on the battlefield. Let's discuss problems on the front and current dynamics. We were looking on the both sides. Meanwhile, while I'm talking about Ukraine, I will show you some Ukrainian war footage. I don't think it would be anything against YouTube algorithms or anything. Both Ukraine and Russia face significant challenges on the battlefield. I want you to realize this. And as the war grinds in, the complexities and vulnerabilities of each side become more apparent. Recently, even foreign journalists have begun to highlight the real situation on the front lines in Ukraine. For example, the New York Times published an insightful article that provides a detailed understanding of Ukraine's tactical approach and Russia's costly advances. I'll provide you a summary of that article and comparison of the problems each side faces in this war based on the videos by Michael Naki, for example, as well as the videos and posts from several military experts and bloggers, which I will tell you about them a bit later. This is the article I'm talking about. Ukraine's Donbas strategy. Retreat slowly and maximize Russia's losses. And we will talk about this a little bit longer. Ukraine's strategic challenges and frontline situation. Controlled retreats and Donbas strategy. Ukraine has adopted a strategy of slow withdrawal from some key towns in the Donbas region, or not necessarily key towns, but the towns they defended very well, like Vuhledar, aiming to extract the highest price in Russian manpower and ammunition and vehicles and equipment and so on, before pulling back. The goal is as outlined by experts like Mykola Beleskov, is to exhaust Russia's capacity and will to continue the war. Ukraine's retreat from these areas is a part of deliberate rope-and-dope tactics, hoping to force Russia to overextend itself. According to Alexander Solanko, Ukraine is trading territory to minimize personal losses, waiting for the moment when Russia's heavy casualties become unsustainable. Let's talk about problems Ukraine has. One of them, and it's a big problem, especially in the Pokrovsk direction, is information flow. There are issues with the accuracy and timeliness of information being passed up the chain of command from Ukrainian field commanders. Several Ukrainian military bloggers complaining about this, that Ukrainian government, Ukrainian authorities sometimes didn't get the accurate information from the battlefield. And most of it, for some reason, even exactly in the Pokrovsk direction. It's not like everywhere on the front. This problem is literally from Pokrovsk area. While we are talking about the problems of Ukraine on the battlefield, I will show you some of most realistic footage, Ukrainian footage of what is happening on the battlefield. And we will talk about next problem, personnel and equipment issues. Ukraine struggles with manpower as it has a smaller population, an army compared to Russia. There are also issues with quality and motivation due to limited weaponry and ammunition, which is further stretched after Ukraine's surprise offensive in Russia's Kursk region. Some Ukrainian soldiers have abandoned their positions due to lack of the sufficient arms and supplies. Ukraine is also constrained by the US restriction on using long-range weapons to strike deep into Russian territory, complicating its defense strategy. If to talk about Pokrovsk, I can add also that there are problems there with the construction of the defense positions and so on. Several bloggers from Ukraine complained about it and told what is happening, and they wasn't happy about that. And also, yes, they complained about that their commanders not always passing accurate information above to the commanders above them. And this is one of the issues. And basically, this issue, it's mostly Pokrovsk region. Another problem is artillery disadvantages. Ukraine faces a significant artillery deficit, even now, after they received help, with Russian forces enjoying a 10-1 advantage in some areas, like around Vuhledar, for example. Despite destroying columns of Russian tanks in ambushes, Ukraine forces have had to retreat to avoid heavy personal losses. They had to retreat from Vuhledar, for example. And as I said, it's not a strategic town. And General Hodges confirmed that as well, and Ukrainians confirming it. Don't treat every town in Ukraine as it's like Stalingrad or something. Ukrainian commanders, like Roman, who defended Vuhledar, expressed frustration over the overwhelming Russian bombardments. So Russian planes basically come and throw in FOBs onto the Ukrainian positions. And as I said, restrictions, United States restrictions on using long-range weapons to strike deep inside Russian territory, this is really hurting Ukrainians and hurting their positions on the battlefield. After we underline Ukrainian problems, let's talk about Russian problems. And at this time I'll show you some Russian footage. Some of these videos are older than another, but these are real. These are real Russian soldiers. This is what really happening on Russian front. And it was happening from 2022, 2023, and now in 2024. Let's talk about Russia's strategic and internal problems. One of them is false reporting and command failures. The Russian military is plagued by false reporting from commanders at all levels. While they occasionally achieve some territorial gains, like in Pokrovsk direction, their victories are often exaggerated, leading to unnecessary and repeated assaults, too much official claims on the map. This creates a cycle when Russian troops are constantly thrown into battle, regardless of real situation on the ground. So they're really thrown into meat grinder because somebody reported we took this place or this territory. And they keep throwing them and throwing them and throwing them. And false reporting is huge. If in Ukraine there is a problem somewhere on Pokrovsk direction, in Russia it's on all directions. In all territory of Russian occupied Ukraine, in Kursk region, in Russia, inside Russia, reporting on what is happening on the front. Everywhere. It's a huge, massive problems. And these people are thrown into meat assaults and threatened to be executed if they retreat. Ukraine doesn't do that. That is why some Ukrainians could retreat. Russians can't. They're gonna get killed. Soldiers' quality and motivation. As to quality, you just saw how they look like. Russia's soldiers' quality is another major vulnerability. Untrained personnel, sailors, aerospace forces members, repairmen, and even soldiers with serious health issues, including schizophrenia, are thrown into the offensive. Reports from Russian POWs and Z-bloggers confirm the low morale among Russian troops, who don't know what they're fighting for. Unlike Ukrainians who are defending their lives, families, homes, country, and freedom, Russians lack clear motivation and are often forced into fighting under threat of death from their commanders. Russian Z-bloggers like even Igor Girkin-Strelkov and Anastasia Kashevarova, have also voiced these concerns publicly. In this particular video, Russian commander is telling troops that if they're not gonna go in the battle, he gonna kill them. And referring to some other soldiers who probably sitting in a hole dug in the ground, and they could see those soldiers sitting in that hole, and you will be on their place. When the Russian soldiers literally, their commanders put them in the hole in the ground, and some other soldiers literally peeing on them and insulting them and humiliating them in every way. And then they thrown into meat assaults and they die. Because if they retreat, Russians shoot them from behind. Like, if they turn around and retreat, they shoot them in the face. They're supposed to run forward towards Ukrainians. And if they don't, they will get killed. Remember this guy, Igor Girkin-Strelkov, who started the war in Ukraine in 2014, the FSB officer? He's in jail now. Putin put him in jail because Strelkov was complaining too much about how poorly Russian army performs and so on. Recently I saw the video when his wife and some journalist talking to him in jail, so somebody brought him a telephone into jail. And Strelkov literally knocking down Russia, saying how terrible Russian army is and that their loss is inevitable and the hell will be unleashed on Russia. That's the opinion of Girkin-Strelkov. He is a war criminal wanted for the knocking down MH17 flight, Kuala Lumpur. This Russian soldier is literally on crutches. He is saying that his bulletproof vest is 15 kgs and plus Kalashnikov. And all of this, he is gonna go to the battle. He is saying Russian army loves us. Oh, look at that. People on crutches going into the battle. That's a glorious Russian army. This video made by Michael Naki. He is showing a piece of video made by Z-bloggers near Toretsk.
Здравствуйте, мы бойцы 132-й бригады, находимся на передовой в городе Торецк.
This man is saying hello, we are soldiers of 132nd Brigade, and we are in Toretsk. They all wounded, they are rotten alive, I told you about it in the previous video, now I'm showing it to you. They don't have a medication, they don't have food, they don't have water, this is what is happening. And we will talk about another Russian problem, corruption, abuse and desertion. Rampant corruption, widespread drug trafficking and abuses within the Russian ranks are common, with commanders resorting to torture, bribes and murder of their own soldiers with impunity. While this sometimes resolves the problem of motivation, since soldiers know that they will be killed if they don't fight, it significantly lowers the quality of Russians' military operations. Many Russian soldiers are forced to sign contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense through torture and death threats, while others desert, surrender, or even commit suicide due to dire conditions at the front and the lack of medical assistance. Some Russian soldiers were filmed shooting their wounded comrades. Constant video complaints from Russian troops to Putin, and authorities highlight the lack of ammunition, medical supplies, and even basic payments, further illustrating the collapse of Russians' military morale. So they literally saying they're not even getting paid. And complaining that they were supposed to get more money, but they didn't get enough money and so on. That is why they deserting, they running away, and these are wounded soldiers who literally are rotting alive near Toretsk. This is for all the Russian trolls who was complaining, saying how wonderful Russia is doing in Toretsk. Here they are. If you want to know how the situation in the Russian army, this is the article of The Insider. I will give you the translation of it. Confession. For 72 days I was electrocuted, beaten, and not allowed to eat or sleep. How Russian prisoners are forced into meat assaults. That's everything you need to know. That basically, according to Putin's law, they simplified the recruitment of convicted or criminally prosecuted people to the front. A contract can now be concluded already at the investigation stage. I mentioned to you about this in my previous videos. The authorities can call up to 40% of Russian prisoners. During the war, convicts are formed into storm units, which, as Defense Ministry website reports, were created to break through the most difficult and echelon sections of the Ukrainian Armed Forces defense. In reality, stormtroopers become expendable material in the most difficult and hottest sections of the front. They are the ones sent into meat assaults. Storm units, basically prisoners, also serve as penal battalions. They send those who, from the point of view of the commanders, have done wrong in the regular troops. The insider talk to those who fought in the storm units and find out how the commanders extort money from them, torture, beat them, and throw them into deadly assaults. Many, fearing a long and painful death, shot themselves even before they are sent into the attacks. So, I recommend these articles. Yeah, they didn't think they would be butchered. Surprise, surprise. And now they ended up in the meat assaults. The commander pointed a machine gun at them and said, "Go ahead, bitches, I'll shoot you myself now." So, you could see what they have to say. Who will break first? Both Ukraine and Russia are grappling with severe challenges. Ukraine, smaller size and limited resources, leave it vulnerable to Russia's larger forces. But Kyiv is banking on wearing down Russia through strategic retreats and maximizing Russian losses. Meanwhile, Russia continues to leverage its firepower, but at great cost in terms of personnel and equipment. Recent successful Ukrainian attacks on Russian arsenals have created shortages of ammunition for the Russian army, and Z-bloggers are complaining about the problems with its shells. Ukraine hopes to make the war unsustainable for Russia, while Moscow is counting on the US election, hoping that Trump will be elected and will give Putin everything he wants. Russia's complete disregard for human lives allows Putin to throw over 1,200 Russian soldiers a day into the meat grinder in an attempt to win time. Who will break first remains uncertain, but the coming months will be crucial in determining the outcome of this war. In order for Ukraine to succeed in defending its sovereignty and stopping Putin's unprovoked aggression, the free world must stand united in providing full and unwavering support Ukraine needs. We need to provide the resources, weapons, and financial aid to Ukraine to continue its resistance. One of the most critical steps right now is for United States to lift its restrictions on Ukraine using long-range weapons to strike military targets deep within Russian territory. Allowing Ukraine this capability would disrupt Russian aggression at its core. Only by equipping Ukraine with the means to fight back effectively can we ensure a just and lasting peace, not just for Ukraine, but for stability of Europe and the defense of democratic values worldwide. And for the Russians, so these guys doesn't have to die as well, even I don't feel sorry for them, but nevertheless. The time to act is now. As some Russian trolls blaming me for using some sort of source, I don't use one source. I use a lot of different sources. Whatever I just showed you, I can name a few more. Beside that article of New York Times, it's not just the one source I used. No. I use a lot of sources every day. For example, for this particular video, Ukrainian military bloggers Konstantin Mashavets, Alexander Kovalenko, and Yuri Butusov, who is editor-in-chief of Censor.net and advisor to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine from 2020 to 2021. Russian military and Z-bloggers Igor Girkin, aka Strelkov, Anastasia Kashevarova, and many, many others, like Dossier Шпиона, Два майора, Быть или, many others. Michael Naki, Russian journalist, political scientist, and video blogger. Vladimir Zolkin, Ukrainian journalist, YouTuber, and activist who is filming a lot of videos with the captured Russian soldiers. Nowadays they captured a few from 155th Marine Brigade, the Nazis who killed Ukrainian POWs recently and filmed themselves doing that, and the ones who chopped Ukrainian POWs' head off and running around with it on the spike. So many of them killed right now. Ukraine really hunting them down like a mad dogs. But if they choose to surrender, they are surrendering, and Ukraine taking them prisoners. And I saw videos with them as well, where they saying that they were from jail and they don't like Putin and they had to go to war because they didn't, basically was forced to when they were in jail and so on. But of course they are. What else could they say? They were so cocky when they were killing Ukrainian prisoners of war, not so cocky anymore. So I use a lot of sources. This is part 1 of this video. In the second part of the video, we will discuss, can Putin defeat Ukraine on the battlefield? We just talked about challenges and problems Ukraine and Russia face on the battlefield and beyond. As someone who has been researching the war in Ukraine for over a decade, I understand the importance of reliable information. Although I am not a military expert myself, I have gathered insights from respected military experts, like General Hodges, General Petraeus, Chuck Pfarrer, and others. Besides foreign military experts like these three I just named, General Breedlove as well, and many others, I also pay attention to Russian Z-bloggers, including this Igor Girkin-Strelkov, who provides a window into Russian military perspective. He's actually quite a smart man and can point out Russian failures on the battlefield quite clearly. This way, even those people who don't speak Russian can see the information I present verified and balanced. So I kinda, everybody can lie during the war, exaggerate or something like that. But there are also verified sources and verified information, like photo, video. If Russia claims something, and they can't provide any of the photos, any of the videos from the battlefield, they're lying, and they're lying all the time. But sometimes, some of the channels, like for example Dossier Шпиона, often provide valuable information, and they actually confirm it with the photo or the video, which is, there are specialists who call Asint Analytics, who actually verify geolocation and what happened and so on. So this is how people verify information, and this is how I acquire information I need to make my videos to prove things to you, so you don't have to look at 300 sources. You can watch one video and catch up at what is going on. According to what we just discussed in my previous video with Generals Hodges, Petraeus, and Chuck Pfarrer, Putin's army is not winning the war. Despite that they get some ground and they move kilometer here, half a kilometer there, several 200 square kilometers they did in a month or something like that. Meanwhile, Ukraine controlling Kursk region over 1,000 square kilometers, for example. So, despite all of this, Putin's army is not winning the war. They simply can't do it. Russia is not only lacks the capacity for swift offensive, but will soon struggle to hold on the territories it currently occupies. If to look at the map, so before the election in the United States, Russia is trying to advance everywhere. Near Pokrovsk, near other places, like in everywhere, near Kupiansk. Russia tried to move at least a little bit, and they throw in everything they have into this. They even trying to attack and get rid of Ukrainians in Kursk region, but very unsuccessful. Whatever Putin said recently about 2,000 Ukrainians surrounded and they will get eliminated, that's a lie. Show me the video of those 2,000 surrounded Ukrainians. I'd like to see that. No, nothing like that is happening. Near Toretsk, as I told you what is happening, that Russians literally rotten alive. And nowhere else beside the, yes, there are advances, but Russia paying horrible prices. Like their losses up to 40,000. And it's horrendous. Reports indicate that Russia is deploying untrained personnel, including sailors, repairmen, and even soldiers with serious health issues, to the front lines. I just showed you them. This is why even after losing towns like Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Vuhledar, the front line has not collapsed. Towns like Pokrovsk and Chasiv Yar are not captured, as you can see it on the map. And even some places when Russia claims, like Selidova, they now claiming that they took. And even those places, Russia doesn't do very much. Yeah, they moved. I want you to understand that there are two types of war going on. On Ukraine, on Ukrainian territory, it's a war of attrition. So the more Ukraine destroyed Russian troops, ammunition, equipment, the better. So Russia basically trading few meters of territory to the huge losses. And as I said, they can sustain it. In the Kursk region, on the other hand, this is a maneuverable war. And as Chuck Pfarrer pointed out, Russia is in the attack. So Russia is losing way more soldiers. The losses are horrendous. It's like 4-1 or 5-1. And I'll tell you about it a little bit later. The situation within Russian ranks is dire. Constant video complaints from troops highlight the lack of ammunition, medical supplies, and even basic pay. This illustrates a severe decline in morale among Russian soldiers, who have no idea what they are fighting for. Ukrainians know what they're fighting for. They defend their lives, their families, and freedom. Russians lack clear motivation and force into combat under threats of their commanders. They literally kept some Russian commanders caught in killing Russian soldiers, and it became public, and nothing happened to those commanders. And even, as I said, Strelkov and Anastasia Kashivarova voiced it, explained it, and everybody who understands anything about this war, these are captured Russian soldiers, by the way, they know that Russia is not winning. And anyone in Russia who criticizes the government or the army often ends either in prison or in the grave. However, this didn't stop Igor Girkin Strelkov. Even from jail, he continues to insist that Russian army is rushing towards defeat and the country as a whole is heading to hell. This is direct quote from Girkin Strelkov. Over 2 months ago, Ukraine launched an incursion into Russia's Kursk Oblast, Kursk region, occupying more territory that Russia captured in a year. To these days, Russia cannot liberate their own territory. As General Hodges stated, after 10.5 years, Ukraine still controls more than 80% of its territory, and Russian forces have moved only 50 kilometers in the last 7 months, at the cost of tens of thousands of casualties. This shows that the Russians cannot overrun Ukrainian forces militarily. They can kill a lot of them and bomb civilians, but they lack the ability to knock Ukraine out of the war. The only hope for Russians is what we get tired and quit. Retired US General Petraeus suggests that Russian military is on the brink of collapse. Ukraine is making a smart move, inflicting mass casualties on the Russian army, over 1,100 to 1,200 soldiers a day. The last day was 1,400. Ukraine has destroyed 1/3 of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, which continuing to destroy or damage numerous Russian oil processing and ammunition storage facilities in drone attacks. They just now whacked the Spetsnaz, so-called Spetsnaz military school in Chechnya. I'll explain you a thing or two about that. It's not really Spetsnaz or special forces of any kind. Chechnya wasn't providing soldiers for the front, and people started to complain about this. So what Kadyrov did is basically collect people from all over Russia, not Chechens, just Russians, any other nationalities, not necessarily Russians, bring them to Chechnya and that so-called institute, where they train for, I don't know, a week or two. And then they sign up contracts as a Chechens, people from Chechnya. So Chechens doesn't have to fight. Even the famous battalion Ahmad consists out of 3 different Ahmads. One of making TikToks is a real Ahmad. They're TikTok warriors and making TikTok videos. But the Ahmad who ever showed up on the front consists out of those people who they literally picked up from the streets. They're not even military. Many of them have no idea how to fight. But they call themselves Ahmad, and we are kind of like Chechens, which they are not. And now Ukraine whacked it. It was a legit military target, because these people will go and fight in the front in Ukraine. I promised to tell you a couple things about North Korean troops. There is a great channel, Jake Bro. He's a military man, United States Air Force veteran. And he provides a lot of information because he knows Korean language. He spent time teaching English in South Korea. And he has several videos on North Korean soldiers. And I don't think I can add too much to what he has to say. Basically, yes, Putin signed the agreement with North Korea. Actually, Russian parliament just ratified this, that in case of attack, North Korea and Russia are gonna defend each other. On the place of North Korea, I would remember Budapest Memorandum when Russia promised to defend Ukraine. How did that work out for them, huh? And now several troops, North Korean troops, are already in Russia. I've seen the videos of them in Far East, for example, and now it sounds like they're moving them into Kursk region, which is where the fight with Ukraine is happening when Ukraine invaded Russia. I just showed you it on the map. So, according to Jake Bro, these troops are dead. They basically slaves which Putin bought from North Korean dictator. According to information from Michael Naki channel, these people are very young. So the information that it's some sort of elite forces, which is again, they have not been in the war for 70 years. What kind of elite forces we're talking about? These guys are way too young to be in elite forces, number one. And number two, it's highly likely they will never be able to return to North Korea. They will be dead in the mid-storms, and North Korean dictator wouldn't mind because he doesn't want them to come back and explain to North Koreans how other people live. These people doesn't have electricity. Some of them imprisoned by the whole families because they consider traitors or whatever. And they eating grass, they starving basically to death. Those people imprisoned. And many of them literally never seen a chocolate candy in their life. They don't have basic food to eat, let alone anything else. So, of course, the dictator wouldn't want them to come back to North Korea and explain people what is happening. So, according to several experts, and Jake Bro, for example, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. Putin, even if there are 10,000 of them, Russia just lost 10,000 people in a week. So, literally, several North Korean defectors to the South Korea now wanted to come to Ukraine and fight basically counter-propaganda or information war and explain to these people from North Korea that they're gonna be killed and suggest them to surrender and will be taken to South Korea and have a good life. They have videos, and Jake Bro just showed it in his one of the last videos, I think in this one, when the gentleman, North Korean one, explaining to North Korean troops that they shouldn't fight for Russia and they should give up and have a good life in Korean language. And people complaining, oh, how they gonna communicate with each other. In this case, I can help, even to Jake Bro, to understand how they're gonna communicate. Russians doesn't have to know Korean. Russians has a machine gun, they can just point it out, go forward, or you will be shot. Maybe shoot a couple of them, as an example. And they will run away towards Ukrainians with a gun in their hands into missiles exactly like Russians. And Russians doesn't need to talk to them all that much because they're not gonna live long enough. They will be in the meat grinder in no time. But the fact is that North Koreans are there. It's basically mean that Ukraine is now fighting 3 nuclear countries at the same time. Russia, China, who is helping Russia and providing them key parts for their ammunition and so on. And now North Korea. Congratulations, Ukraine, you get yourself another enemy. And another nuclear country is against you. So, this is how it is. I don't think it will make a difference. All Ukrainians need are more weapons, ammunition, and the permission to use long-range missiles on Russian territory. Ukraine deserves NATO membership and foolproof guarantees of protection. Or they will need nuclear weapon for deterrence. This is my opinion. My personal knowledge of the USSR and Russia, as well as extensive research, confirm the information from these experts I showed you today. And the rules how to deal with Russia are: number 1, don't believe anything Russian officials say. Number 2, everything in Russia is much worse than you can imagine. And my future videos, for example, about Russian economy, will confirm what I just said. Does this mean that Putin has lost the war and we can all relax now? Not so fast. In my future videos, I'll discuss more about this and what kind of cards Putin have up his sleeve, as well as economic factors and Russian nuclear capabilities. What can Putin do now? We will see it soon enough. He did not use all his cards yet. And I'm not talking about nuclear weapons. So stay tuned, to be continued. Learn the truth and stay informed. Thank you for watching. See you later.